Hey, welcome to Seamless. Seamless is a 2D, arena-based puzzle platformer where you take on the role of a Kitsune, Oni, Tengu, or Okami and fight for glory. In Seamless, you have one goal, and that is to take out all the other players with the use of a well-timed sword strike. But before we get into that, we should teach you how the game works. When players spawn in for the first time, they'll find that the game has no jump. The core feature of our game is to utilize a gravity switch, which you can find is spacebar on keyboard for player 1, right shift for player 2. On controller, gravity switch is by default right bumper. By pressing your gravity switch key and a movement direction, the player character can switch to run on walls. This is your main movement technique as a player, so master this and you will become omnipotent. At the time, one keyboard can only support 2 players. However, if controllers are accessible, then the game can be played with up to 4 users. Do note that if the game is being played through Parsec, then the host machine must use a controller, but we'll talk about Parsec in a separate video. Let's switch gears and talk about actions. Players have access to 3 actions. They are a melee strike, a shuriken, and a talisman. By default, keyboard actions are bound to J, K, L, semicolon for player 1, B, N, M, comma for player 2. For controllers, most of your attacks are bound to the triggers as well as X or B depending on your controller type. The first attack that you have access to, which is the most important, is L for player 1, B for player 2, or X or B on controller. This is your bread and butter melee strike. The melee strike forms a circular crescent around the player character that, in its duration, damages all players besides the user. Players can deflect sword strikes if they activate their own within a defined time frame. We refer to this action as parry. The second action that players have is a shuriken. This is bound by default to K on player 1, N for player 2, and right trigger for controllers. A shuriken in our game does not kill. It merely stuns players for around 3 seconds, removing their ability to move, but will retain gravity depending on the direction they were originally facing. The third and final action is a talisman. The talisman can be thrown out by pressing J on player 1, B on player 2, and left trigger for controllers. By default, talismans do not do anything on their own. However, if a secondary key is pressed on player 1, semicolon, on player 2, comma, and left bumper on controllers, then the player will teleport to their most recently placed talisman.
One other important thing to note is that players on death will respawn as a crow. While a player is in crow formation, they can fly around the screen with WASD for player 1, arrow keys for player 2, or joystick for controller. To respawn faster, players may press any of the attack keys, which in some situations can result in accidental respawns that the team is currently aware of and working on a fix. I have included a minute of gameplay so that players, as well as faculty, can see how the game could be played in some situations.